So Casey, don't sweat it. We already got you drinking water as we got started. So this is my first 10 minutes with the idea behind doing an interview like this or a conversation with friends, both in the Minneapolis tech scene, recruiter space around the country, or whatever it's going to be, is that I'm pretty notorious for saying to folks, hey, you got 10 minutes. And of course, it never ends up being 10 minutes. So if you're logging on, you don't know who I am, this is probably going to go half an hour to 40, just to warn you ahead of time. This is my buddy Casey Allen, who is both a professional friend and more like a brother than anything else. And he decided that he volunteered to be my guinea pig, my canary in the coal mine, or my sucker, whatever sort of title you want to give him. So Casey's like, when are we finally going to do this damn thing? So that's how we're getting this started. This will be the first one.
Because that's what good friends do, is they nag.
That's true. So I'm hoping that when you and I get done doing this, that we'll have enough content to actually be able to hit record or hit save and download on the YouTube, and we're going to become internet infamous in days, dude. So thank you though for helping me out with this. So rather than me do an introduction of you, man, just tell me a little bit for those who are catching you for first time, like what's some background, who are you, and what do you do?
What I do, the infamous cocktail party question. What do I do? The answer I would generally give is I work with entrepreneurs, and then full stop. And generally, the person either doesn't give a rip one way or the other, and we'll move on, or we'll probe deeply because it's such a mysterious type of answer, which is, I guess, good. I'd rather give a headliner than give an essay. But the path to getting here is actually probably more linear than most people would think. Although I grew up completely non-entrepreneurial and not risk-taker at all, and growing up in a really very conservative, non-risk-taking family that didn't think that anything related to business or making money at all was a virtue. I, out of necessity, had to hustle my way through college and make more than the average cat did. And so I knew I would never be able to work my way through college, which I had to pay 100% of. I would never be able to do that, but making $12 or $13 or $14 an hour, I had to figure out how I could be worth $20 or $30 or $40 an hour, which is a really interesting mental exercise to go through, of figuring out how can I be such a snowflake in this life, in this world, where I can, with a straight face, make 20 or 30, ask people to pay me $20, $30, $40 for something, when generally speaking, I'm 18 or 19 years old and I have very little to sell. But I found a way. I was a student painter to start with, a very unglamorous job, but it taught me a lot about hustle. And from there, I started a couple other companies in college to work my way through. They were some moderately successful in that they spit off lots and lots of cash. And then some were, there's a lot of false starts and a lot of failures and a lot of rock bottoms there too. And then after college, I then went on to continue to start some companies. Some were service-esque, some were tech-esque. And again, some moderate successes, plenty of false starts and failures and painful memories along the way. And it's those painful memories that now drive me to do what I do now, because if I can help even a handful of entrepreneurs avoid all of the pain and suffering that I put myself through, then my job in life is done.
How do we find you online? Like, on Twitter? Where do I find you? What's your Twitter handle?
Sure. So I'm actually blessed with a fairly unique name. So I'm easy to find in a lot of places. Twitter, by far and away, by an order of magnitude, is the easiest way to get at me. On purpose, anyone can direct message me. So by far and away, it's the easiest way to send me something, share something with me, ask me a question, ask me for a phone call. I'm happy and honored to interact with just about anybody about just about anything.
So what is your Twitter handle? So what is @Casey__Allen?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So somehow there's two Casey Allens, two bastards that beat me to it early on. And I've been unsuccessful getting them to part with their Twitter handle. So it's Casey__Allen. And
then Allen with an E-N at the end. So what are you working on now? Like what's keeping you busy? What are the projects that you're working on? Hey, and do me a favor, can you put your other earbud in? Because I'm thinking that while you're talking with your hands like I do and you're orchestrating, you're probably knocking your microphone around a little bit.
Sure.
That was so
The
much.
last 5 or 6 years, I've been helping startups mainly one-on-one. I did the accelerator thing, launched an accelerator program, launched a seed fund, and all of these entail helping startups one-on-one, working with startups one-on-one. And then I came to a point where that wasn't interesting enough for me. That wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to figure out, how do I help startups at scale? And again, going back, how do I help startups at scale avoid a lot of the pain that I went through as I was launching and growing companies? Since God knows I made every mistake in the world twice.
Wait, are you telling me? Wait, are you telling me you're not a quick learner?
I'm the slowest learner in the world. I mean, just about everything I've done in life, the first time I do it is not just a failure, but an epic failure. Like I've probably failed in ways that like nobody else has, and it's a fairly bold and embarrassing statement to make. But the amount of ways that I've found to fail at certain things in life are just pretty audacious. Largely because I will pretty rapidly early on just try to find every shortcut way to get something done, and which is a very go big or go home method, meaning it's either brilliant and it works out very nicely for you and everyone, or it works out disastrous for you and everyone. So it's I'm certainly not a quick learner by any stretch.
So I
If I am, no, that's right. If for whatever odd reason I appear to be a quick learner to anyone from the outside, it's generally now the biggest difference between me now and the biggest difference between me, let's say 15 years ago, was me now will reach out to just about anybody and ask them just about any question. And there's very few things that I do anymore now without talking exhaustively to a ton of people that have already done this before me and asking them zillions of questions about how and why and where and what worked and what didn't work. And so now I'm exceptionally better now at very publicly admitting I have no fucking clue what I'm doing versus me 15 years ago, who never in a million years would admit that.
I just wanted
so
to
now,
hold on, for the record, I need to note that in my first interview, I was not the first one to cuss, let alone drop an F-bomb. I just need to make sure that everyone's aware of this. Continue.
That'll be the first of about 22 more to come.
Good.
Cover your ears, kids. So when you think about how do you help startups at scale, there's a couple of ways. I could teach. I could try to become a college professor. That doesn't interest me at all because they have their own definition of success, and that's probably not my definition of success. Therefore, I'd be horrible. I'd be a terrible employee. I'd be a terrible professor. I wouldn't fit into that machine. I could write a book, but that doesn't interest me. Nor I don't have the attention span. Nor is it at all the type of revenue generating machine or business model that I'm interested in doing. I have no interest in writing a book so that I can then start speaking and then start a consultancy. I'm not interested really in either of those three. So I've launched a series of startup conferences focused just on tech startups so that I can bring together all the best people in the same space so that they can learn and they can connect and take things to the next level. And so I launched a conference called Enterprise Rising, which I've done twice now. I launched focused just on enterprise tech startups, really companies that are pretty much seed to A. I'm really not interested in startups before that, nor am I really interested in startups after that. And then I've launched a conference called Health Rising, which is focused just on health tech startups. And then I'm also in the process of launching a boot camp that's meant to teach beginner angel investors how to get started investing in tech startups.
So I'm probably going to come back to bits and pieces of that as we keep having this conversation. One of the things that's on my mind is that we seem to do conferences really well in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I've got a theory about it. Like, what's yours? Like, you know, your second Enterprise Rising, you had, 120 some folks, whatever it was, at the University of St. Thomas. Right, years ago when I was running my recruiter conferences, you know, I was getting 250 folks. What is it about community here in Minneapolis and St. Paul? Like, do we just know how to do it? Do we just like each other? Like, do you have any thoughts or ideas behind that?
I think any community. I don't think the tech community or the tech community in Minnesota has anything unique or special about it. And I know that's not very Homer of me to say, but I suspect that if, let's say, craft brewing community wanted to start a sequence of conferences and events, that they would be a smashing success. And I think that if the people that juggle torches or stamp collectors or whatever, if somebody would step up and be entrepreneurial enough to launch a series of things, I suspect that it's underserved. I suspect supply and demand are probably out of whack in just about every community. And so I honestly think that if you're not successful at doing an event, and by the way, I don't feel like I'm a success at all. I don't feel like my events have necessarily been a success at all. I feel like I've learned a lot of painful lessons getting started, and by no means do I have it figured out, nor do I feel like I'm anywhere close to being the success that I want to be. And I'm happy to talk about what an epic failure I think I've been, if you want. But the supply and demand, I think, are still years and years away from being met, meaning the appetite for events. So let's not call it conferences, let's call it events, right? Which is a little broader, but I think it helps us talk about it more intelligently. The appetite for events that are specific to tech, maybe even specific to tech entrepreneurship or startups, I think that are run by credible people, that have the ability to get credible people in the room, which is really at the end of the day what people are paying for. Run by credible people that can get credible people in the room. I think that the appetite is still super strong and unmet. And I think that's why you see so many events that, as long as they have a decent amount of reach and they have good channels, good audiences, and they're able to get their message in front of enough people, they have no problem selling out, usually in a matter of minutes, hours, and certainly measured in days, not weeks. So I think that it's actually fairly difficult right now to fail at this, at least here in our market, in our city, in our area, as long as you can put together a credible team running the event, and as long as you can get credible people in the room. I think there's so much hunger. I think there's so much hunger for more of this. And even though we've seen like ridiculous growth, even though when you take a look at how many events there were 2 years ago, or how many events there were 5 years ago, it's like grown 50x. I still think it can grow another 2 or 3 or 4 or 5x before things start getting saturated and before it gets tough. I don't think it's anything unique about us as a people or us as a community or us as an ecosystem, or it's just honestly, there's just tons of fucking hunger, and there's not enough people that have the credibility to be able to put together something awesome, whether it's demos, whether it's just a happy hour, getting the right people in the room, right? Whether it's an actual conference where people come and speak with the hopes that everyone in the audience is learning stuff. There's just an insatiable hunger still. There could be so much more.
So we're a couple of weeks out from Twin Cities Startup Week. So speaking of events, week-long thing, right? This is going to be our third one. There are 70 plus events scheduled for this year. I think there were 40 or 50 some for last year. What are you looking forward to with this week? What are you going to see? What are you going to attend? What are you hoping to get out of it?
First, you might want to take a moment to explain to anyone that's not clear what Startup Week is. You might want to explain what it is.
So Twin City Startup Week, our third annual, very grassroots. I know that I'm putting together I'm on a panel with Patrick Meenan from Arthur Ventures and Victoria Shannon from Lead Pages, and then Phil's going to moderate a panel of us. We're going to show people like how we've been recruiting in startups. I know that you're going to be doing a session yourself. What's yours about?
It's for beginner angel investors that want to start angel investing. It's me telling them pretty much how not to lose their shirt. So
we've got 60, 70 some events like this. I know that my friends at When I Work, where I was at for the last 13 months, are doing a product event at Coco that Friday. We've got Beta.mn, which is a very grassroots sort of event. Lots of really young startups, and there's some voting from the tech community. The Minnesota Cup will be halfway through the week, which is one of the largest sort of entrepreneurial competitions now in the country. Later that night, we'll talk more about this in a little while. We've got Nick Rosseth's documentaries debuting that evening. So it's anything from small little conversations people are having to mini demo. We'll have 500, 600, 700, 900 folks attending that. So thank you, Casey, because of course everybody should know what Twin Cities Startup Week is, in my mind. So talk to me a little bit about what are you looking for? What are you looking to see, learn? Who are you trying to meet during that week?
Sure. So another way to put it that might make more sense to people is that it's sort of what South by Southwest is to Austin. This is to Minneapolis, and it's a way to cram a bunch of nonstop events all into one compressed time frame to make it easy for people to create things, perhaps for the first time ever. So whether you're creating some kind of just a party or some kind of a special event, or whether it's just open co-working, it's just an excuse. It's really an excuse for anyone in the community to step up and say, I want to make something happen, and I want to make something happen that involves getting a bunch of really cool people, like-minded people, all in the same space at the same time. So it's our South by Southwest, and one of the cool things about it is it makes it's a good gateway drug for anyone that's not hip to the scene. Somebody that either doesn't spend a lot of time in the startup scene, or somebody that is not super familiar with Minneapolis or the Twin Cities or Minnesota tech scene. So especially if you're from the outside, there's a fly-in program, which makes it really, really easy for people to fly in. You probably know more about that than I do. Why don't you break down exactly what that is?
So last year, Greater MSP covered some flights from folks around the country who were interested in getting jobs in the tech scene. So not necessarily developers, right? Could be marketing, PR, C-level type folks. This year it's a concentrated effort. So far we've had, I think 50 or 60 people show interest. We've had phone calls with a little more than half. We've already confirmed.
So this is totally like an application process, right? I mean, there's people that show interest, and then you have a conversation with them and say, all right, we think this is awesome. We're going to extend an offer to you. Is that kind of thing?
So so folks who might see this next couple of days, if you go to TwinCitiesStartupWeek.com, upper right-hand corner, there's I don't know if it says apply or flying-in program or whatever it says. It's a short, simple little Google Doc. And then we're just having 15, 20-minute conversations with folks to be able to say, like, what's your interest in being in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or a tech job or a startup type job. We also had a couple of folks expressing interest in Fortune 500 roles. So we're also including them into this, because while it is Twin Cities Startup Week, thankfully one of the large supporters of Twin Cities Startup Week is Target Corporation. And so whether it's someone wants to go to work at Target, Best Buy, SPS Commerce, Gov Delivery, maybe not so much just the small startups in town, but it's the folks we want to bring them to town, be able to say, here's what's going on, here are the events. I'm going to help do introductions for them with employers in town, so we can try to expedite some interviews while they're in town. So that's kind of one of the unique things that's probably different than most of the startup weeks across the country. So thank you for asking about that. So I think in the end, we're hoping for about 25 or so folks to come into town during some part of that week.
That's awesome. And what's cool about the fly-in program is that it makes us feel and look and appear and people will perceive us of being super inclusive, because oftentimes we talk about the Midwest and we talk about, like, oh, we're our own thing, we're our own tribe, we're our own, we root Midwest, we love Midwest, and at the end of the day, this just opens the door wide open, saying, you know what, if you want to come hang with us, please come hang with us. You want to come check out our scene, check out our startups, meet quite honestly, some of the fastest growing startups in the U.S., which, yes, we do have a few here in Minnesota of them that are growing 3 or 4x year on year for several years in a row. You want to hang out with those CEOs and those people, like, come, like anybody and everybody is welcome, which sometimes goes against what a lot of people feel Minnesota is and what people from the outside view Minnesota as, which is people that keep to themselves and keep others out.
So one of the events during the week I mentioned earlier, Nick Roseth's documentary is going to debut that night. So there was an article in the Star Tribune that you were quoted in today, and it kind of walks through how Nick kind of came up with the idea. But to paraphrase it, right, it was, Chip from Jam Software says that, like, paraphrasing, we do a really poor job at telling our story. So Nick has about a 45 minute documentary that's going to be shown after the Minnesota Cup. And you were quoted in the Star Tribune today. Why do you think this is important to the tech community, and why is it important to us now?
At the end of the day, there's very few people in any community that has the ability to like go way, way, way up and take a macro view and be able to just get a temperature or barometric measure of everything that's going on. VCs are in that position because they just by definition they have to pretty much be interacting with every nook and cranny of the ecosystem because that's what they do to make a living is to find the best deals. Certain people that are involved in groups that are trying to help the overall ecosystem, they might be in a good position to be able to talk intelligently about our community or any community from a macro view. But at the end of the day, most of us are just individuals, just heads down, plugging away, doing our own thing. So at the end of the day, who's gonna be able to tell a macro story, a big story, a wide story? Who's gonna be able to share with everyone, here's what's going on in its entirety? And it takes a dude like Nick, and I give him nothing but props to him because this has been nothing easy about what he did. And he's one of the few people that talks about doing something really big and really audacious and actually executes and follows through and does it. Whereas a vast majority of people would never execute and never even begin unless actually finish, which he's doing. So massive props to Nick Roseth for instigating as well as executing. But at the end of the day, it takes somebody doing a lot of legwork like Nick, who he came up with the idea, he founded it. He's like pretty much single-handedly and a videographer, but pretty much he did all the work and reached out to a zillion people, had a zillion conversations, and got half of them on camera. And it takes somebody like that that's going to go down that road and have all these conversations with all these different players in the ecosystem to get a collective story. And our story happens to be a pretty damn good one. And a pretty optimistic one and a very trending up to the right one. And so it takes somebody like Nick to be able to do that. And most people don't, and props to Lee Schaefer, the columnist for the Star Trib. Really, really well-written column today. He really nailed it in every way. I think he made it very palatable to all of his readers. If you haven't checked it out, just type in Lee documentary Minnesota and you'll find it. Lee, Lee. And so it just takes somebody being able to put themselves in a position where they're having enough conversations and even capturing those conversations on camera that can tell a broader story. And so who can do that? I mean, who in any community can tell a super broad story about here's how we're doing overall, here's all the stuff that's happening, here's what's making us really awesome and maybe even more awesome than we were before and why we're trending towards even awesomer. And Nick did that. And it takes somebody like him spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours for pretty much no financial gain at all, no real gain, except just to deliver a story and a narrative to the masses that he feels like the masses haven't heard. And
who the hell would interview you and I? Like, what was he thinking?
I know, scraping the bottom of the barrel, right? I guess.
You kind of brushed on one of my sort of next ideas. So, if we think about bulls and bears on Wall Street, bulls are optimists and bears are pessimists. Where are you on the Minnesota tech scene right now? Are you a bull or a bear?
I'm the Minnesota tech scene. Boy, that's pretty broad. I can't imagine a more broad term than.
Okay, let's go with the startup folks. Let's stick to Startup Week. Where are you with the startup community? A bull or a bear?
So I'm a bull, but let me break down why, because it's easy for people to say, yeah, I'm optimistic. If you ask 100 people in 100 cities, they would all say they're bulls, right? You ask people in Indianapolis, you ask people in Miami, you ask people in Dallas, Texas. I mean, they're all going to say the bulls, but do they have the goods to back it up? Mm-hmm. There's a couple indicators that I personally care deeply about and pay attention to when I think about the health of a startup tech ecosystem. One is the amount of funds, new funds being raised. This is super important because if startups cannot get funded, then they're not going to thrive. It helps greatly if startups can get funded from investors in their own backyard. Not necessary. Sometimes it's not even smart. Sometimes it's smarter to go raise money from investors outside of your own area. But it makes things a million times easier if you can raise money, if you have investors in your own backyard that are actively and aggressively writing checks, but more importantly, that they're actually good. They're actually good investors. They're actually good at what they do, and they can actually add value in very meaningful ways. The success of a VC is that, am I able to raise another fund, right? Am I doing so well that I can then every 2 or 3 years raise another fund and keep going at it, keep going at it, keep going at it. So I look at how many funds have been raised, and more importantly, I look at how that compares to previous years. And the good news is we have a decent amount of funds being raised. Every VC firm in town either has raised a new fund just recently or is in the process of successfully raising a new one. We have some brand new firms, actually VC firms, that have been launched, that have never been launched before. Probably most notably, most visibly, Ryan Brochard with Matchstick Ventures, also Dave Mao with Come Up Capital, and several others too. So funds. Are there more funds being raised? Yes or no? It's a super important metric. And good news is we're trending in the right direction. Number two, I take a look at co-working spaces. Co-working spaces they're easy to gloss over, and it's very easy to ignore the impact that it will have on a startup ecosystem. But at the end of the day, startups need to house themselves somewhere in the early days. Post-seed, they need to, once they raise their first, $600K or $800K or $1 million too, right? They're going to have to go work somewhere. So where can they work? More importantly, where can they go work that's close to other investors and or startups? I don't think it's a secret to anyone that if you surround yourself with other people that are going through the journey with you, it makes everything better. So co-working spaces, are there more co-working spaces being opened? Yes or no? Another binary question, and the answer is yes. We've probably almost doubled the amount of co-working spaces here in the area, depending on what you want to define the area as, but in the Twin Cities Metro in the last 3 years. So, and that's probably going to just continue to keep growing. And the third is exits. It's difficult when we're wrapping up 2016 and no tech company will go public. And so what you have is a bunch of companies that just keep putting off being public. And I'm pretty confident that first or second quarter next year, we'll see Code 42 go public. We'll see Red Brick Health go public. We might see Ability Network go public, which is probably one of the more successful companies in town that nobody's heard of.
Literally.
Ability Networks. It's a really boring company. It deals with Medicare and Medicaid payments, but it's located downtown Minneapolis. But they just took I think it was a $500 million investment from a huge private equity firm about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. So we might see that pop IPO-wise. So all these exits and IPOs are super important. And we saw a great exit from a local tech company a week and a half ago called Calabrio, which was acquired by $200 million. And the reason why these are super important is because when a company gets acquired, the money that is acquiring that company is going to go to shareholders. So who are shareholders? Well, shareholders are the early investors, the founders, and the early employees. And if they can then cash out and take that money and then put it towards doing their next thing. If you're an investor, you're going to put it towards doing more deals. That's good. If you are a founder, you're probably going to put that towards one of two things. Either you're going to start angel investing, I hope, and that's where I come in. It's my job to nag and guilt every successful founder into angel investing, and I'm happy to be that guy. So either you're going to start angel investing or you're going to go ahead and start your next company, preferably both, hopefully both, both of which are really, really good next steps for a successful founder. And early employees, that's great. That allows them to maybe start their own company or to take another big risk, be in a good financial place where if they cash out and now they made maybe 1, 2, 3, 400K after taxes, they've got some money in the bank, they're doing okay. Now I can take another great risk and join another startup, be employee number 14 or number 22 or number 35 and swing for the fences again and do so without having to take a market rate salary. So exits matter greatly because it recycles all kinds of awesomeness, mainly cash, but also knowledge and wisdom back into the ecosystem. Sorry, my light's on a motion sensor, and I guess I haven't been fanatically moving enough.
You've been conducting. This is when I know I've got you, Casey, is when you talk with your and let me pause in here for a second.
That's why I'm bullish. that's why I'm bullish. And exits actually, I can't actually be really bullish on exits yet because there's a lot of we need some IPOs. We need to see how the IPOs will do, right? Especially after the lockup periods in 90 days. So we need to make sure that the IPOs do okay. But there's going to be several companies. There's already several companies that are IPO bound, right? And so in 2017 or 2018, Jam Software probably in 2018 will IPO. So these are going to be really good outcomes for us, and that's an indication. That's a hard indication of healthiness in an ecosystem. So when I say I'm bullish because there's real shit happening that create real fucking outcomes that are really fucking good for everyone involved, that allow us to keep doing more of what we're doing, bigger and badder than ever before.
So going off of the Calabrio, and then Sport Engine, or now Sports Engine, as they've been slightly renamed, getting acquired by NBC Sports. So does this play into a little bit of your view about enterprise startups, and that's something that we're good at in Minnesota, and hence why you've been putting on your events? Like, is this a bit of a validation of what you've been talking and thinking about?
Yeah, but more importantly, again, like at the end of the day, acquisitions are going to happen. I pick some podunk town, and every once in a while there's an M&A activity. I care about, is it trending up, and are the outcomes good for everyone? So I care deeply about good outcomes. I'm not interested in a company getting acqui-hired. That's that might be a mental relief for the founder, but it's certainly not a great outcome for the ecosystem. So it depends on just what lens you're looking at the world through. And I'm looking at it for what is a net win, no matter how you look at it, for the ecosystem. So these kind of outcomes are actually more validating for me about the thesis that I have, which is that we are, depending on how you want to measure it, and it gets a little murky, but no matter whatever metric you want to pick, my sentiment is that we might be top 15 in the world at enterprise software. And that's a pretty bold statement because there's a lot of markets that have some really great shit going on in the enterprise. Number one's always going to be the Bay Area. Number two might be New York. Number three might be Seattle. Number four might be Chicago. Then after that, it starts getting murky. Maybe Austin's number five, or Boston. Boston might be number 5 or 6. And then it starts getting murky. But my point is that there's a couple things that we are uniquely awesome at. And there's a lot of shit that we suck at. And that's perfectly fine. Like, I wish people would be more okay with the fact that we have a really weak gaming ecosystem. I mean, if you're a gaming startup, generally speaking, we haven't had any wins in gaming. We don't have any investors investing in gaming. We don't have any really smart, knowledgeable veterans that have been at it for 20 years and that are ex-EA or ex-Zynga that are in the area. So generally speaking, the resources that you need as a gaming startup just aren't here. If you're a B2C and you're trying to create the next Facebook or the next Pinterest, the shit that you need isn't here. And it's not. I'm not nagging on Minnesota. It's not in.
Yeah.
It's not in Cleveland either. It's not in Houston either. It's not in Phoenix either. So it's in every entrepreneur's best interest to say, I'm trying to build an awesome big startup in X. This is my vertical. This is my industry. And it will serve me best if I make sure and do a gut check. And do a gut check by looking at numbers, and do a gut check by talking with lots of people and say, am I in a place where it has the resources that I need, yes or no? And if the answer is no, do yourself a favor and pick up and move. There's 2 companies that are finalists in the Minnesota Cup right now, which is the big, huge business plan competition here in Minnesota. And it's very tech heavy, although it's not tech exclusive. There's 2 finalists right now, and I've told them both in the last 3 weeks, I've told them both point blank, you should consider moving into Chicago. Because both of them are dealing with marketplace business models, which is where you are in the middle and you're trying to connect this person to do business with this person. And if they do business together, you succeed and make money. We generally have a very weak marketplace startup DNA. We don't have any successful marketplaces here. Chicago, largely because of Groupon, has an amazing marketplace ecosystem. There are so many really interesting, badass startups coming out of Chicago, where Chicago has pretty much made itself, maybe after the Bay Area is number 1, Chicago number 2. Chicago is the marketplace capital of the world. If you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to create the next big marketplace that helps connect 2 different people together and create a big moat around it so that you really own that space, no matter what that space is, and you want to and you just take a rake anytime or a commission anytime they do business together, sort of like eBay. If you want to create that marketplace, like be in Chicago, because there you're going to find more VCs that get it, understand it, will invest wisely in it, but also be value add. You're also going to find tons of advisors. You're going to find a bunch of angel investors too to get you to the point of VCs. So every area is uniquely awesome at something, right? If you're a fintech company, like it might be in your best interest to either be in the Bay Area, New York, London, or Chicago, probably in that order, and really like nowhere else. Like if you're a fintech play, be in those 4 markets and you'll get everything you need. If you're not in either of those 4 markets, you're going to really, really struggle. And I hate to be like Mr. Negative Nancy, but it's the fucking truth. Like startups need so much resources. So do yourself a favor. If you're enterprise and you're in Minnesota, you're in a really fucking good place. We've got everything you need. If you're health IT, especially on the enterprise side, not B2C, like if you're trying to create some B2C health play, we may not be the best market for you. But if you're selling to enterprise, like fuck yes, right? If you're in ag tech, we're in a really good place for ag tech. If you're in edutech, we're in a pretty damn good place for edutech. If you're in sports tech, especially for B2B sports tech, man, we're fucking awesome. We have such a strong DNA in that, like it's awesome. So my thesis is that every city, every region, every area is uniquely good at something. The Bay Area and Silicon Valley is unique in that it tends to be awesome at just about everything. And it's pretty much the only area in the world you'll find that's awesome at just about every vertical, every business model, every style of startup imaginable in the world, and it will be for the next 75 years at least. But that's just a unique outlier, right? But aside from that, like, I mean, if you are an ad tech company, move to New York, right? That's where you need to be. So we're awesome at enterprise. We're awesome at a whole slew of things. And I'm really, really interested in not talking about what we suck at, but rather focusing on the 2, 3, 4, 5 things that I think we're uniquely good at, specifically things that I think we might be top 10 in the world at. Because when you're top 10 in the world, that's when shit gets really interesting. When you're top 10 in the world, that's when startups start moving to you. And when you're top 10 in the world, that's when companies don't move away from you. When you're top 10 in the world, no startup is going to pick up and like move to the Bay Area, New York, unless right. They can't find what they need there. But if you're awesome at enterprise, I don't know a single enterprise company that's actually moved away from Minnesota and succeeded. Actually, there's one, Zencoder. But the main reason he moved is because he got accepted into Y Combinator. And once you go through Y Combinator and all of a sudden you have investors throwing money at you, it doesn't make any sense to actually move back home. So he made a very smart, rational decision, although he probably still could have grown Zencoder here and done perhaps just as well. But generally speaking, I can't name a single health IT company that's moved away that has succeeded. Once you're top 10 in the world at what you do, nobody moves away. No fintech company in London is going to move away because they got everything they need.
We mentioned the Bay Area, Silicon Valley a couple of times. I know you and I had swapped a message the other day. There was the Chris Olson, the co-founder of Drive Capital, had a contributing article in the Venture Beat last week. And had what I would call a pretty bold statement saying that he thinks that the next 5 years that the Midwest will have more startups than the Bay Area. You know me, like I'm all good with somebody throwing an elbow and blunting a nose like that. And for me to finally drop my first F-bomb, I'm like, fuck yeah, let's go. He also got a lot of blowback, of course, from the folks in the Bay Area because, well, I was going to call them a bunch of arrogant pricks, but that would be horrible for me to say. But what's your take on that, though? I mean, that's a bold statement, but how do you see, the next 5 years out? Let's assume there's not a recession. Just play it out. Politics are okay. There's no recession. Nothing in the world happens of significance. What do you think? Give me Casey Allen's crystal ball.
You're not going to get any crystal balls on me. But let me comment on what he wrote, and let's get very specific because words matter here. Is the title of his article, the guest post that he did in Venture Beat, was in 5 years the Midwest will have more startups than Silicon Valley. And he actually picked a really good title because it's fairly jolting. And the reason it's jolting is because very few people in our universe are willing to take a stance in saying that anything will rival or be on the same level as, or maybe even, heaven forbid, be better than Silicon Valley. Like nobody does that. Just for the same reason nobody says Atlanta, Georgia will have more stock traders than New York City by 2020. And nobody says that because nobody would believe it. Everyone would call bullshit and think that this person's insane, right? Nobody says that Tulsa, Oklahoma will have more movie studios than LA or Hollywood. And the reason they'll never say that is because everyone knows there's no way in hell that would ever come true. But I think if you actually break this down, it's actually not that impressive. I'm gonna be sort of a dick here and simply say the Midwest is pretty fucking big and Silicon Valley is pretty small. So saying that the Midwest, which is
hold on,
states.
Breaking news. This just in. Silicon Valley is pretty fucking small. Okay, keep going.
So I mean, it's like it'd be like somebody saying in 2019, China will have as many factories as Sri Lanka, and everyone would say, "Well, I hope so." China's only 114 times bigger in both population and square miles than Sri Lanka. The Midwest rivaling in numbers as the Silicon Valley actually isn't that impressive. But here's what's killer. Here's what I like, and here's what I appreciate about Chris Olson. By the way, it needs to be noted that Chris Olson is a VC here in the Midwest, but unlike perhaps a lot of VCs in the Midwest, he has an absolutely epic, and he and his partners have an epic track record. I mean, these guys were top 1% for a decade and a half of what they were doing back when they were VCs in Silicon Valley, back when they worked for Sequoia, which is the best VC firm of all time. So these aren't just like two dudes who say, oh yeah, Midwest, we're bullish, we're going to start investing in them. These are dudes that like uprooted their families and their networks and walked away from the Bay Area and said, you know, we're raising our next fund, we're going to do our own thing, we're going to call it Drive Capital. But we think the real play here is to get away from all the other VCs that are clamoring to get into Series A's and B's. And we're going to go and do this arbitrage play where we see a lot of quality and a lot of quantity, but we don't see a commensurate amount of VCs chasing those deals. And we think we can do awesome there. We think we can do some real damage in a good way, damage there. We think we can fund some really awesome startups. And so when they say that it will rival, that we're going to have as many startups as Silicon Valley, first of all, in pure quantity, I would hope so. I think what certainly matters more is quality, right? So startups, in terms of quantity, don't really fucking matter. Nobody cares if there's, let's say, 40,000 startups in Minnesota. That in and of itself is not very meaningful. What's meaningful is how many of them are getting to Series A, getting to Series B, getting acquired. If you could measure profitability, that's certainly something to measure, but it's impossible to measure that because nobody gathers that kind of data. So we care about measuring metrics only matters if you're hoping to see certain outcomes, and the outcomes that most entrepreneurs are going for is let me build something that is so valuable for strategic reasons that somebody comes along and says we have to acquire them, we have to buy this. If we don't, we're missing the boat. And so that's where every entrepreneur wants to be someday down the road. And when a VC is willing to take a stance and write a post like that, like Chris Olson is, and simply say, well, you know, this is why we're planting a flag in the ground for Midwest. It's a pretty bold, it sounds bold, but on the surface it really isn't. But I still admire the fact that these guys have amazing track records. I can't remember what their first fund was, but I think their first fund was $200 million. It's almost unheard of. Like no VCs for their first fund ever. So these guys left their firm that they worked for a very long time and started out, branched out, and did their own thing. And generally speaking, anybody that can raise a first fund that's over 50 million, it's like amazing, like top 1%. It's very difficult to do for a first fund. So that is a sign. This should be a sign to anyone, even in the Bay Area, even all the haters elsewhere that want to hate on the Midwest, of the fact that these guys have pedigree and track record that allowed them to raise $200 million from really smart people that are sitting on lots of cash. And that should be pretty indicative that these people know, these Drive Capital and all the partners that's founded it, know what they're doing.
I think we're going to end it on that note because I think it's going to be some good sort of fodder for us over the next week and a half as we start seeing our friends during Twin Cities Startup Week talking about this article and stuff. So maybe we can end our conversation here because no doubt we're going to pick it up a time or two. over the next couple of weeks. And don't be surprised if I ask you post startup week, hey, can we come back and do this again? For those who have been watching, we've had a couple of delays here and there, either with me or with Casey, and the lights turning off at Casey's place. And maybe you just heard the fire department roll by my window here in the North Loop. My building is not on fire, for the record. We're good. But I'm hoping to have a lot more of these conversations. Casey, thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for taking a shot at this. And just trying to put out some content that maybe some folks would enjoy. So thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for pushing me and asking me when the hell am I finally going to do it. You're a good friend, you're a good brother, and I appreciate it, kid.
Dude, I look forward to, I like what you're doing here. I like your approach to this. And I look forward to the kind of interviewees, all of whom are hopefully going to be far more interesting than I will. I look forward to seeing them and seeing who you have on. This will be pretty epic. So,
and we'll have drinks. We'll have drinks on the deck very soon. All right.
Looking forward to it, man.
Thanks, kid. We'll talk to you soon.